Hi, welcome to the Nurture Nature Show. I am the Reverend Dr. Laura Kim Joyner of One Earth Conservation and Ministry. I serve as wildlife veterinarian and Unitarian Universalist minister. During our time together, we will have a chance to nurture ourselves so that we can nurture all of nature. Welcome into this community of hope and nourishment and solidarity with all of life. Today's theme is Nurturing Parrots of Honduras. I'm going to be talking about parrot conservation there. But what I'm really going to be talking about is the challenges that we had there, the successes that we had there, and what we did. What is parrot conservation like? And while I'm talking, I think what is going to happen is that we'll all be affirmed that if we have persistence and if we dream, we can nurture nature and nurture ourselves while we're doing it. So I so wish this for you. So thanks for coming along on this journey, which is part 2. We began the journey in the last episode, and here we go to La Moskitia, Honduras. And as you can see, it's right there in Honduras on the Atlantic coast in Central America. And so what did we do there? As we see next, I explain a little bit of what we did there. So yes, I'm a wildlife veterinarian and we're working with endangered parrots. But really what we're doing in all of that work is we're protecting the life that exists. Humans, wildlife, and all the environment. And when we preserve and cherish the one, we're preserving and cherishing the many. In other words, individuals matter. Every one of those parrots and every one of those trees and people matter. So here's the basic things that we do in parrot conservation, what we did in Honduras, as you see next. Unfortunately, there's a lot of poaching of parrots in Central America and all of Latin America. People want them as pets. So we do some protection work. And here we see Santiago Manzanares. He's a Miskito indigenous man, and he's a tree climber. That's what he's doing with all the ropes over him. And he also is protecting the nest as we're monitoring it. And then we also not only work with the local people doing protection, we have to work with the military, as you see next. And so we gathered up and we went to the military bases and we helped work with them so they could do their patrols in our area to keep the birds from entering the illegal wildlife trade. And then we had our own community protection groups, as you see next, and we had about 20 people from 2 different communities. And they would do every day, go underneath every nest to make sure they were still there and they were safe. And there they are with their proud new uniforms. When you do parrot conservation, you also work with the local government agencies. Yes, the military and Honduras, because they're in charge of rescuing the birds. But we also worked with the Forestry Service. And so in the next shot, we see how the Forest Service came to our area to try to confiscate parrots that had been poached. And on one tour, they went to a house and they found not only parrots, but the skins of wild animals. And so they confiscated those because not only parrots are at risk, but also the jaguars and the deer. And other parts of our protection program, as we see in the following, is the fire brigades. In the last couple of years in Honduras, we've had the communities hired to do fire brigades because the forest fires, the wildfires are really tough this time of year. And so they're out and they're also protecting parrots. So in this one slide, the man is, the firefighter is showing us his burned boots. They're burned boots because there was a nest tree of scarlet macaws and the fire was coming up and billowing, and they ran there through the fire to make a fire break around the nest tree, and their boots burned because of it. All of these people are protecting the parrots so that they can fly free. And in the following, what we want to take a look at is how we increase this protection beyond our 2 core villages of Mabita and Rus Rus. We went to a village on Rio Coco, which is on the Nicaragua border, called Pranza. And when we went there, we said, well, show us your nest. And this man, and we'll go back to that previous slide, and he's showing me his wristband that says "Fly Free Macaw." You can see it's been patched several times. He said, "You gave that to me last year." And it's broken several times, and I've sewed it back because I so want to protect the parrots. And so there he is in the field showing us his nest. And so we added another community, a Pranza, that is now interested in protecting their parrots. And not only Pranza, but as we saw in that next slide, a village called Wahavispan. It's a village, a very small village of close families, moving up towards Rio Rarunta and Patuca, moving into the Miskito forest. And they said, we want to protect our parrots. Everything's getting poached. And so we met with them and registered their nest and said, next year, you're going to be part of the core conservation area. So protection is one thing that we do. And we also do many other things, as we see next, is we have to say when we're not successful. So even with all this effort, birds get lost. What you see here is a felled pine tree that has been axed down, and in the foreground is where 2 yellow-naped Amazon young baby chicks were. And the people cut down the tree so they can pull the chicks out. And you never know if the chicks are going to die or break their arms or their wings or their legs. And so we lost those 2 chicks of yellow-naped Amazons. And also, let me tell you another story about what we lost this year. As we see next, we discovered that people were coming into our area to poach. And what is on this stump are, they're called scalers or spikes, or the telephone climbing spikes that people use to climb telephones. And they strap them to their legs, and they're able to go up the pine tree like this and extract the chicks. So they found some poachers on motorcycles coming into the area with these, which you only use to take parrots. So those were confiscated. And then what we had to do is we had to go to the village where these people were from, talk to the elders and say, what are your people doing on the other indigenous land, taking their parrots? So we met with them, as you see next, with the elders in this village of Suhi, and the military came with us. And everybody's talking about how we don't want parrots to be poached. And they brought the young men in front of all of us to hear that. And threats were made and voices were raised, because it's not accepted totally that it's not okay to poach birds. There's hundreds of years of tradition, and it takes a while to shift this kind of thinking. And so that was run-ins. We have conflict with the communities around us, and this will settle down, but that's one thing we lose, is risking some of our relationships. And something else that we lost is this story that I want to tell you, as we see next. So there was a nest. It was called nest number 7. And here we can see the climber climbing up the tree to look in the nest to take out that young scarlet macaw chick. That's about 5 weeks old at that age. And you see those holes there? That's because people make them with a hatchet so they can steal the chicks. This is a very low nest. But we said, oh, we're going to protect these birds this year. Everything's going to be fine. And so we went away after we examined the birds, and we came back like 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, and we got to the tree, and the chicks were gone. Somebody had taken them. So we called a conference underneath the tree in the following photo. And you can see we don't look really happy. I mean, once you lose these birds, they're gone. They go to towns, they get on planes, they get on boats, they go to Jamaica, they go to the Mideast, they go to Japan. But we said, we're not going to let these birds go. So we got on the radio and we started calling people. Not that you can call a lot of people that far out. I borrowed a phone. I went to the top of the hill. I got a Nicaragua signal, called some people in the big city of Tegucigalpa, and I said, can we encourage the Forest Service? Is there any way we can get these birds back? And several days passed, and then I had to go into the main town of Puerto Lempira. And while I was there, I called up the Forest Service, and I said, how's it going? Did you try to go get our birds back? And he said, oh, well, no, but we've got 4 other birds that we confiscated. Would you like to help us take care of them? And I said, well, sure. And so they drove up in the truck with these 4 scarlet macaws. And, oh, by the way, 2 of them have bands, metal bands, which only we put on in all of Honduras. I said, oh my gosh, a thrill went through me. Those were our chicks. We got them back. And so in the next photo, you can see that they're in their boxes because they're young birds and they're about to be fed and cleaned up. And it's really fun to see this box because one of the boxes where they are says Nido +1 protección in Spanish, which just means nest protection 1+. And so we got the birds back. The first time it's ever happened in Honduras. Matter of fact, I got emails from all over the world going, how did you get your birds back? And we got them back and they went to the rescue center and they're now flying free. And so next, let's show you a little bit more what we did this year, is we monitor the nest and chick health. We want to know how the nests are doing. Sure, poaching is a huge problem, but what else is going on in the chicks? And there's the climber, and there's 2 wild scarlet macaws inside their natural pine cavity. And so part of the work that we do when we monitor nests, as we see next, is we want to know what their health is. And there's a long list of things that can go wrong with the wild bird out in their nest. And so I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of these. And so in the next slide, we'll see one thing that we see quite a lot of is something called stress lines. It comes from stress, so that when the feather is growing, it can't get enough blood supply, so it can't fill in the feather. So you get these lines, these fragile lines. So many of our birds had these stress lines. So something's going on with them out there in the wild. Stress from fires, from poachers, perhaps not parent attention or enough nutrition. It is a fairly reduced habitat when the birds used to roam all over Honduras. So they do have stress lines, so something's going on with them. Many of them are underweight, and as we see next, some of the other things that they have going on are external parasites. We have some lice and 2 different kinds of mites there. Can cause anemia and certainly discomfort, and so we are able to document this as well. Other things that affect the chicks, as we see in the following, is evidence of these mites, and it causes lesions or itchy spots. So this is a young scarlet macaw with orange there. That's a colony of mites. And so because the scarlet macaw is endangered, we treat those birds. Every bird, when we climb a nest, gets medicine to get rid of the mites, and it does work. And we hope it helps their weight gain and reduces the anemia that comes with that parasite load. And next that we'll see is other things that happen to these birds if they're really ailing or if they've been confiscated from poachers. They come to our Rescue and Liberation Center. It's now been going on for about a year in Honduras. And this year, when I left in June, we had 55 birds in the rescue center. Now, most of these are flying free, scarlet macaws, but we added some 20-some scarlet macaws this year. And we also, as we see next, brought in 2 batches of parrots, Amazon parrots, 22 of these. And no, we didn't, the children aren't in the cage, but they are accompanying their grandmother who is taking care of these birds in their cage. Rescue centers are really important for conservation projects because the authorities must have somewhere safe and secure to bring the birds, and so they can be released to fly free again. Okay, in the following slide, here's a story about our rescue center of some success we had. This is a bird, flies free, was released 5 years ago as a young bird less than 6 months of age. So you can see the arrow is pointing to a band that we put on. And so this bird still flies back every day or every other day to eat some food. And the bird's about 5 to 6 years old. Now here's the interesting thing about this bird. We did a little study with this bird, and it turns out that this bird with his mate have chicks in the wild, as we see in the next slide. Here's their nest. So we know that birds that we release that are not raised by wild parents but by us can reproduce in the wild. And here are their 2 chicks as proof of that. And these birds, as we see next, they're looking to us to keep them flying free and to support them so that they can return to the wild and can reproduce. Now there's a story about this nest I want to tell you more, as we see in the next slide. There was a wildfire that came through on a Sunday, came in really close to this nest, and we were so worried about this nest. So we went there. As we see next, the fire came right up. That big tree in the center is the nest tree. So you can see the fire came right up to it and stopped. And we said, whew, thank goodness it didn't hurt the tree. But there's a great deal of smoke. And it turns out we think it did hurt the chicks. So part of what we do is we see next, we take blood, that's me taking blood from the wing vein of a parrot, and we analyze it. We run all the laboratory diagnostics, very similar to when you have blood taken. And so we ran that blood and we checked for what percentage of the blood is red blood cells. And in the next slide, what it shows us by doing this test, that there was a lot of red blood cells, more than normal percentage-wise, and that's called polycythemia. What causes that? Respiratory issues, often with pollutants. So we feel, this is the only bird I've ever seen it in the wild, of having polycythemia, that the smoke came through and caused lung damage. They can't get in enough air, so they produce more red blood cells. And so the fire can harm the birds, and here's some proof of that. Well, let's go on next to show more of what we did. Is in the rescue center, these birds come in sick, and we had a batch of really sick birds that came all the way up from Nicaragua. So 2 veterinary students came from the vet school in Catacamas, and they came for 2 weeks to be trained and to do the work. So the rescue center is an awful lot about veterinary medicine and teaching as well. Okay, so what's next? What more did we do? As we see next is we work with the local authorities to help them take better care of their birds as well. The Forestry Service doesn't have a budget line for cages or medicines or trained people who can take care of the birds. So I came into the town, and here is a macaw just put into a plastic crate for weeks on end. And what else can they do? They don't have the resources to take care of this. So I said, no more of that. Our group, One Earth Conservation and the villagers of Miskito, we're going to fix this. So as we see next, we just gave up our whole Sunday and made an emergency cage so we could get those birds out of those plastic crates into a more suitable cage until they could go to the release center and fly free. So you're getting an idea of the kind of work that we do? Okay, but there's more as we see next. Part of all this work of monitoring and protection, we have to be raising awareness. We have to raise the consciousness of conservation, and then certainly education for children. So wherever we go, we visit the schools such as you see here. We take children with us out in the field and visit as many schools as we can, as you see next here in this slide, trying to work with them so they know that their birds are endangered and can make choices to help themselves and to help the birds. We also work with not only the younger people, but with the older people as well as we see next, that we're training the local villagers to be able to do the nest monitoring and the protection and run the rescue center. And as I said before, we also teach veterinary students, as you see in the next slide, how to do conservation medicine. And so here we are out in the field teaching everybody how to do this. Okay, so what more do we do? Let's see the next slide so we can continue on with this adventure. Is we train actually everybody in the country, or as many as we can, in avian conservation medicine, especially at the universities, at the vet school. So this is at the vet school in Catacamas, and there I am working with all the students and the professors. Then they in turn can go into homes and teach people how to better take care of the birds and deliver a very strong conservation message, that they're losing their parrots and we need to quit bringing birds into our homes. Okay, so the adventure continues about what we did in Honduras in 2016. We just need to have partners. We can't do it by ourselves or just one organization. It takes many people in the country. So working with the government, the military, the Forestry Service, the indigenous council people. So that was another work that we did and we were able to progress quite a bit on. Alrighty, so come on, what's next? Let's see what else happened with all of this work. So this is like the most important slide of the entire show today. Here's what happened with that work this year. Going back to 2014, not a single bird entered the wild population. Everything either failed or was poached. 0 in 2014. We were really sad and desperate. We did a little bit more work in 2015. In 2016, we went for it. I was there for 2 months. And this year, not a single chick entered the illegal wildlife trade. No more poaching. They were able to fly free due to the hard work of the people. So what are some of the other results we have? As we see in the following, one of the greatest things that happened is all this workforce, people were paid for. Some people only for 1 day to be a guide, others for 4 months. So 39 villagers received aid, not aid, they worked for it, right? Support, economic support, so they could be, otherwise they don't have an income. They're farmers and hunters. And so this was really great news that we were able to spread out the income. And as income goes, people have room for choices to make conservation choices for their birds. So the next slide sums up all the successes that we had. We have more parrots flying free, more parrots rescued than ever before, more support from all the different organizations around us in the villages, and more employees, and also a change in attitude. People saying it's not right to take birds, it's not right to clip their wings. Okay, celebrations, also challenges, as we see next, what was going on. Number of challenges. I think our biggest challenge this year was a reliable vehicle. We had to rent one that was 25 years old. It was breaking down everywhere. As you can see here, we're 2 hours from home. Nobody goes on this road. And so we just had to cook dinner in the road as we figured out a way to get the clutch fixed so we could go on home. The poaching continues. Communication issues. It's really hard to contact anyone. You have to climb a hill and hope you get a signal from the next country over to use a phone. The rescue center, birds are sick, birds die, so we need more help and support to have those people be able to take care of the birds. And then we're still losing habitat because everybody wants that land. They want to farm, they want to put cattle on it. And these are not the indigenous people, and they want to take out the mine and the ore and the trees. So there's a lot of pressure to this. So what are we going to do about that as we see next? Well, we're going to rise to this challenge. We're going to do it. We're going to get a reliable truck. Somehow we're going to get one so we can go to more areas. And this takes money, so we're doing fundraising and we're trying to find a way so we can do this. More volunteers to help us here with the fundraising as well as there. More students to teach so we can spread the word about conservation. And then we just need more time to have an outreach to the children and the adults in the area. An education and consciousness raising program. So as we see next, what we're really trying to do is grow this core area where we had such great success this year to all of La Moskitia and then into the Moskitia part of Nicaragua. You know, we're pretty good in 2 villages. Next year, 7. The year after that, who knows how many. That's the dream of what we're trying to do and what the people and the parrots in this region need. And so as we see in the next slide, here's what our dream is showing. This is showing both the Nicaragua and the Honduras side of La Moskitia, and that big green line is Rio Coco that breaks the two. So this is the area called La Moskitia. And you can see a little white line that's circling the yellow pens of our communities. That's pretty much what we protected this year and into next year. And then that skinnier white line is all of La Moskitia in Honduras. So when I look at that, I'm going, by next year, we're going to be protecting almost 1/3 of La Moskitia, which is one of the most precious and largest forests left in Central America. Come on, people, we can do this. So as we see next, what our dreams are is not only to increase the land that we protect, but to conserve other species. One of the species we want to protect, as we see following, is the yellow-naped Amazon. We have hardly done any work with them, and they're prized as pets, and they're getting poached too, so we need to do more work with them. And then probably the most endangered, or the most endangered parrot in all of Honduras is the great green macaw, as we see in the following slide. And we have not been able to study them. It's been too dangerous to get into the areas, or our car breaks down, and we can't reliably get in. But next year, for sure, we're going to register these nests, and we're going to start protecting them. You want to be a part of this? You want to come help? Well, let's see how with the next slide. We need more conservationists. And what is a conservationist? It's one who knows and grows the knowledge and awareness of nature and uses that understanding to save themselves and to save the earth. In other words, it's somebody who helps their neighbors as themselves. So we need more conservationists in whatever way that you can do that. And you're certainly welcome to do that with us, because we have great hopes. In the following slide, here is what we wish. We wish to remodel society with more justice, compassion, and care. And when you're a conservationist, you're an activist that's trying to make a more beautiful world for all of us. And we have hopes that maybe we can do that. And here is, in some way, our blessing or prayers we see in the next slide. Every time we say goodbye to a village, or every time it's the last time we climb a tree and the young macaws are about ready to fledge, we say pripalisa, and that means fly free in Miskito. And we all have wristbands that say that. This is 3 different species of parrots. And so we give them out to the villagers. And we say, fly free, parrots, fly free, people. And we do this as shown in the next slide, because we really feel that if we can nurture ourselves, nurture the children, the future of Honduras, that they in turn can grow up and take care of themselves and their lands. And that is truly, truly our hope. So we're almost ready to go and end the show, but before we go, let me just tell you there's going to be some slides that are going to scroll after I finish talking. And one of them has a list of reflection questions. So you can talk to journal yourself or talk to other people about that. The next slide is on suggested actions that you can do in response to watching the show. So please take a look at that. And actually we'll go back to the previous slide because we just want to keep looking at this beautiful child. And then after those scroll, there is something I want to tell you about is we have an upcoming Nurture Nature webinar in October of 2016 on multi-species intelligence. It's nurturing nature, loving animal nature through multi-species intelligence. So take some time on that slide to see how you can enroll and find out more about it. And finally, we end up with all kinds of resources and ways to get connected. And also, since we are a volunteer organization and a nonprofit, ways that you could donate your time and your resources. So before we send you off to look at all your homework and to do, let me leave you with these words. They who bind to themselves a joy do the winged life destroy. But they who kiss the joy as it flies live in eternity's sunrise. And so may you fly free as well. Pri Palisa.